Tuesday, the 24th day of Tevet, corresponding to the 21st day of January 2020. Breakfast and class at the Edmond J. Safra Synagogue today has been graciously sponsored by Mr. Dibo Atar and family Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved brother, Rafael Ben Linda, Alav Shalom, on the occasion of the Sheloshim. Iratzon, that through the words of Torah and Berachot that will be said today, will be an elevation to his neshama. Amen. The Lighthouse live video feed dedicated Le'ilui Nishmat, Deborah Feige Bat Shemuel, Ora Deborah Bat Shemuel, Esther Rivka Bat Avraham, Monica Miriam Bat Fani, and Menachem Mendel Ben El Hanan Aleim Shalom. The iTorah.com live audio recording dedicated for the Shidduchim of Nehamadina Bat Hanabatia, Eliyahu Chaim Ben Esther, Eliyahu Rafael Ben Farha, Rachel Penina Bat Jenny, and Sarah Simcha Bat Sofi Be'ezat Hashem. May they all find the Shidduch. Amen. Okay, as we mentioned yesterday, today we have a guest speaker, and you know me, we don't have usually a lot of guest speakers. People like to have continuity in Torah classes, which we accept that and we love that. But today we welcome Dayan David Grossman from Lakewood, New Jersey, the director of the Veta Va'ad and the Sephardic Halacha Center, which is a program developed to help the Sephardic communities nationwide to have a centralized location for all matters that have to do with the topic of finances, the topic of money, loans, interest, collateral, co-signing, insinuation of interest, and all different matters that follow the banner of financial concepts. We know the Gemara writes, Adam nikar b'shelosha devarim. A person can be recognized in the way that they behave when they are confronted with three specific situations. Kiso, koso, kaaso. Kiso is how the person handles money. Last week, if you remember, the Gemara spoke about the concept of investment. How do we invest money? The Gemara concluded you need to diversify. You need to split the money. Don't put all the money in one basket the way they say in English, but actually a third in real estate, a third in merchandise, and a third in liquid. Meaning to say, have easy access to your money. Sometimes people invest the money in something. Now a great deal comes, Rashi says, and you have no liquidity. Or you have a CD, and if you open the CD, they give you a penalty. So you think twice. But in the meantime, you miss a great deal. So therefore, the Gemara said, keep a portion of your money readily accessible for any good deal that comes your way. The other matter that can determine the essence of the person, koso. Koso means the drinking habits of the person. And the drinking habits of the person doesn't mean coffee or tea or smoothies. It means alcohol. God forbid, sometimes a person develops a close relationship with alcoholism, and that brings the person down, the body and the spirit. And last but not least, kaaso, the concept of anger. So before I'll turn over the mic to Dayan Grossman, and I'll do something that I don't often do at this time, which is to listen. I usually speak. Today I'm going to try to listen a bit, because there's always what to learn in life. Today is also the yortzeit of the Baal HaTanya. The Baal HaTanya was a student of the Magid of Mezrich, which was the student of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal HaTanya was known for being the founding rabbi of what's known today as Chabad Lubavitch movement worldwide. He wrote the Shulchan Aruch. Part of the Shulchan Aruch is the version of the Shulchan Aruch that is attributed to the Baal Tanya, but he wrote the Tanya itself. Why do I speak about him today? First, today is his Yortzeit. So we already know that whenever it comes the dates of certain tzaddikim, that we have access to information and to their teachings and guidance through life, is important to speak about them. But the reason I'm going to speak about him today, and in a few minutes I'll give over the mic to the great rabbi with us today, is because there is a fascinating paragraph of the Tanya that talks about the concept of anger, describing why anger is so dangerous for the life of the person. And when I mean dangerous, it includes all of the above, which means it's a concept of creating an unhappy environment around the person. But I like the Balatanya to give the speech before we invite the great rabbi. So the Balatanya writes, and it says as follows. The Gemara writes on the topic of anger. Amen. And it says that anger that causes a reaction in the person's life, nistaleka mimenu ha'emuna. The Balatanya writes that a person that allows anger to overtake their life, automatically the emunah of the person seems to be on vacation. What does it mean? Emunah means faith. And if we have faith that everything that happens is Ashgaha Peratit, divine providence, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the chief rabbi said on Shabbat, Rabbi Amar, one of the speeches he gave on Shabbat was to understand that everything that is unfolding in front of our eyes, including anti-Semitism, impeachment, governmental confusion, lack of government in Israel, different countries of the world that are going through challenges, a person cannot see it with the glasses of CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. They are talking from what their eye sees. But a Yehudi must understand that when it comes to government and leadership and chaos in certain countries, it's all weaved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only that, what's going on today in Jerusalem? You know what they're telling you today? Avoid Jerusalem today. And the day of tomorrow and the day after. Why? Because they have 50 prime ministers, kings and presidents of 50 countries, of 48 countries, to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. That is a very infamous name in Judaism. That was a place where regretfully thousands upon thousands of our brethren were literally killed in the time of the Nazi regimes, Imach Shemam Bezichram, and they are all coming to, in a unison way, in a uniform way, to remind the world of the dangers of anti-Semitism and how anti-Semitism today is more dangerous than 75 years ago. Why? Because then it was very limited. Today, with social media, anti-Semitism gets spread out in no time. You post in Instagram, I'm not sure if that's doable, but in Facebook or Twitters. In other words, you text, you type, you post. These are new words that are part of your tweet. And guess what? In 1 minute, the entire world is already know what's going on. But you know when will be a gathering of all of the leadership of the world in Jerusalem? When Mashiach comes. And the great rabbi said it on Shabbat. You cannot be oblivious of what is going on in the world. So I said to somebody last night, you know what? Now that we have 50 heads of states, kings and princes and government and prime ministers and presidents, have Mashiach come already? What, are you going to schlep back and forth, go back and forth to whatever part of the world? So what they say avoid Jerusalem is because of security and because of traffic areas. So many, for example, they say tomorrow Kevel Rahel is shut down. You want to go to Bethlehem to Kevel Rahel, you got to go the day after. But it doesn't matter. We hope the Mashiach comes very soon. Let's continue with the Balatanya and then I'm going to move on. And it says, Ki ilu hayama amin sheme'et Hashem hayta zot. Because if the person truly believes, the Balatanya says, that whatever happens in the life of the person, what does it mean? What are the basic principles of Emunah? Nothing happens without God's approval. And everything that happens is out of Hashem's will. So the Balatanya says, if this person would have had faith that everything that happens is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lo haya ka'as kelal, the person should not get angry. Why are you getting angry? Because the guy didn't come on time to the appointment? What are you getting angry? Because you couldn't make the sale? What happened to your emunah? If you have emunah, we should not get angry. Obviously, it's not so easy. Because some people, have easier time than others to control their anger. Not only that, it says, a person needs to remember that we have the freedom of choice. We can choose what to do and what not to do. I can allow myself to release my anger, or I can say, you know what? I'm going to exercise self-control. Obviously, exercising self-control takes much more discipline than just reacting. You understand? And this is part of the message that the Balatanya gives in the Igeret HaKodesh. If you want to check it out, chapter 25 on page 276. And it says that a person needs to understand that, remember David HaMelech, alav shalom. David HaMelech, the Pasuk tells us about Shimei ben Gera. Shimei ben Gera one day cursed King David. We learned this a few nights ago in the Gemara class. And what was the reaction of David HaMelech when one of his soldiers wanted really to get rid of Shimei ben Gera? You have to remember, you're not allowed to insult a king. The same way you're not allowed to insult your parents, your teachers, you're not allowed to insult the king. And this fellow insulted David HaMelech. And Avishai ben Zeruiah, which was a seasoned warrior in the army of David, says, allow me to get rid of him in no time. What David HaMelech says, hold on, you think he cursed me? Ki Hashem amar lo, God is cursing me through him. Now, this is a very lofty and a very high level of spirituality that David HaMelech was able to develop throughout life. You know, David HaMelech had everything in his life against him. How many challenges, how many years of suffering King David had to endure and had to overcome. But what gave David the power of survival? Chapter 27 of Tehillim. Lule he'emanti lir'od betuv Hashem. David HaMelech says, everything that God does is for a reason. But he didn't say it's for a reason. It's for a good reason. This was the famous Talmudic sage that used to say, Gamzu letova. This is for a good reason. Even though you don't see the good about it, but there is always good that perhaps is hidden from our eye, but is definitely, eventually will become revealed to the eyes of mankind. So we hope, first of all, that everything goes very smooth in the land of Israel and no crazy things are happening. And we hope that this Be'ezat Hashem will become a reality when all the leaders of the world, because it's written in the holy books, that all the leaders of the world will gather in Yerushalayim when Mashiach will come to officially accept the leadership of Mashiach upon the entire world. Be'ezat Hashem, this topic to be continued soon. At this time, if we can turn the camera and the microphone to the great Rabbi. As I mentioned yesterday, introducing very briefly what the Sephardic Halakha Center does, basically helps people at all levels when it comes to halachic documentation in the topic of money. Whatever relationship of money it may be, to credit card, borrowing a credit card, post-signing a lease, post-signing a mortgage, being a guarantor, lending money and getting some type of benefit out of it. So I'm going to let the rabbi start discussing some of the interesting cases. Time allowing, we open the floor for a few questions. I already received a few questions, and some questions, in order to protect the rabbi, I'm not going to ask them publicly. Why? Because there are questions that to understand the question is a whole shi'ur. And there is an important law in the Shulchan Aruch that especially when it comes to dispute between two people, you need to have, right, Rabbi, correct me if I'm wrong, you need to have both parties, right, in front of you in order to give both an equal opportunity to tell their side of the story. Imagine yourself, if I tell the rabbi my side of the story and you're not present when I tell him. So the rabbi says, okay, this fellow seems to be reliable. So by the time you come an hour later, he already have a preconceived notion. And that's why the halakha is clearly, you need to have both people in front, and only then you can discuss the detail, and especially the confidential details of the cases. So at this time, I'll give the mic over to the great rabbi. And for those listening to the class or watching, we'll try to post, Be'ezat Hashem, the link of the Sephardic Halakha Center, which I believe it is THESC
Sephardic Halakha Center.
.org. THE, can you write it down, please? THE, Sephardic S, Halakha H, C Center.org. THESHC.org. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So those that would like to know about the halachic services that the Bedin of the Sephardic Halakha Center provides, just go to the website, familiarize yourself, and you'll be surprised how many halachot are in the world of money. One of the most complicated volumes of the Code of Jewish Law. All right? Bechavod, Rabbi. As you wish.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I just want to. I'll start. The rabbi mentioned the great day of the passing of the Balatanya. Balatanya wrote one of the most very significant work on Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch Harav. And I want to mention in his memory, in his zechut, a very fascinating chidush. And just to show how things come together, just this morning, I was approached by two people with two different she'elot, two different questions with regards to monetary matters. And these two questions we'll try to glean a little bit of insight as to the answers to these questions through a tremendous chidush given over to us from the Baal HaTanya, from the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So I'll say over the questions, and then we'll try to tie them in together. One question was somebody asked if at night he lives in a condominium, and sometimes it's difficult time finding parking. And he comes home at night, and across the street there's a mall that after 9 o'clock there's hundreds and hundreds of empty spaces. And his question is there any issue, is there any problem using the parking lot of the store, of the mall, to save himself the tircha and to be able to park easily?
The question is because of using without permission?
Yes, using without permission.
From the owner of the mall.
Right, correct. So obviously if a person's going to shop at the mall, there's no problem to park there. That's what it's there for. But is there any issue of parking in a parking spot where you're not patronizing the store, not patronizing the mall, and you're just going to sleep, and you'll get it the next day before the mall opens? And a similar question could be, let's say the mall is open and you find a spot there, but you're not patronizing the store. You're going across the street. Is one allowed to park in that mall? That's one question. The second question was posed that there's a person that was shopping in Winn-Dixie, and did
they pay advertisement for the class?
I say Winn-Dixie because it's very that was the question. It's also very important that to note that I don't think Winn-Dixie is owned by Yehudim.
Correct.
So he was walking through the mall, and there in front of his eyes was a small wad of cash in one of the aisles. What does he have to do with the money? Does he have to return it? Does he have to give it to Winn-Dixie? Does he have to give it to Tzedakah, Maaser? What should he do? Is he allowed to keep it and buy ice cream with it? So, very interesting. So now I'll say over the chidush of the Baal HaTanya, and we'll try to wrap it all together. Another question: what happens if an individual knows clearly he's a good friend of his, he has a good friend, and he's maybe in his house or he's in the synagogue, and he wants to take something, he needs a piece of paper, and this guy has a wad of paper, and you're pretty certain that you're certain that he definitely wouldn't mind if I took a paper of his, but he's not around and you need it right away. Are you allowed to take it without permission, knowing that my relationship with this person is such that there's no problem. He would definitely let me use it. A similar question could be to use something of somebody else's. Baruch Hashem, here it's not so relevant, but in New York, if everybody went home from the synagogue, went home from shul, and you're freezing cold, and you see a scarf in the coat room that says Yaakov Goldberg's name on it, and you know Yaakov very well, and you know he doesn't need his scarf. It's here. He doesn't know where it is. You'll give it back to him. Or can I use it on my way home? Am I allowed to use it without permission because I know I have a relationship with him? He's a good friend. So there's a lot of proofs back and forth. It's not a very clear. I mean, it's now. What would be the issue if you're 100% sure that he allows it? What would be the halachic issue? Why shouldn't it be? Why should it be a problem? If you would ask him, that it would be okay. So what would be the problem? So very interestingly, there's a Gemara in Elam Etziot that many people. That's really one of the first Gemarot that any boy learns. I believe in 4th and 5th grade when they start learning Gemara. In Elam Etziot, there's a sugya there that's referred to as Yush Shelo Mida'at. Yush Shelo Mida'at, which means when a person, as in the case in Winn-Dixie, a person loses money, loses something on the floor. So why would I be able to take it? Because there's a concept of Yeush. When a person loses something and he gives up any hope of ever finding it again, so that's as if he was mafkir. It means even though he's the owner, just because you drop it you don't lose ownership. But if you drop it in a way where you'll never find, and you give up any hope of ever finding anything, finding it again, So that could be in halakha as if you were mafkir, as if you said this should be hefker, like we say before chametz and before Pesach, that all my chametz should be hefker and mivatel. And when a person takes something, he says hareze hefker, this should be hefker, then anybody can take it. He's really releasing his ownership to others, that anybody who wants it can take it. So if a person goes ahead and is miya'ish, and he says that in his mind, he doesn't have to say it in his mouth, he doesn't have to say it verbally. In his mind, he says, I will never find this again, I give up any hope. So the item becomes hefker, and anybody could take it, and the coined the phrase, finders, keepers, losers, weepers. That's, if there's no, now how do we know if he's miya'ish or not? So the halacha is if it doesn't have a siman, if there's no identifying, it doesn't have his name on it, or it's not folded in a very specific way, or if it's not placed in a specific place, that the makom would be a siman. So then, when a person loses it, he'll give up ever hoping of finding it. Similarly, if he lost it in a place that's rubam akum, that most people there are not Yehudim, most people who hang out over here are not Yehudim. So in his mind, he says, even though it has a siman, but I know most people here, who's going to pick it up? Likely, somebody who does not have a mitzvah of hashavat avidah will pick it up. So I'll likely never find this again. So that creates the concept of Yeush. So the question the Gemara poses is, what happens if we know that certainly if he would realize that it's dropped, he would give up hope. But it's such a case where he hasn't yet realized that he lost it. So if as soon as he realizes it's lost, he's miya'ish. But right now he's still sleeping. Right now he doesn't know that it's lost. So the act of Yeush, the act of giving up hope, didn't happen yet. So the halacha is that Yeush shalom edat, Yeush that happens without him knowing, because he doesn't realize that it's lost, lo havi Yeush. So from here, says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, from the Balatanya, that permission, shalom edat, is not permission. In other words, we asked earlier, one of the questions we posed was, what happens if you know my friend will definitely let me take it, but he's not around, so I can't ask him, but I know our relationship is such that he would allow me to have it. So what could be wrong? If you know for sure he would allow it, what's wrong? So say the poskim that just like Yeush, shalom edat, even though for sure the Yeush would come later, but it hasn't come yet, so the same thing would be like permission. If the person would give permission, but he hasn't given permission yet because he's not here, so that would be the same case, that it would be permission and therefore you would not be able to take it without permission. So now let's analyze. Parking in a mall, that there's no use for it. So first, there's a concept of zeh neheneh v'zeh lo chaser. It means they have no use for it. You're getting pleasure, but the other person is not losing anything because it's not rentable and he can't use it in this manner. It's open and available. But in other cases where let's say the mall is open, so then we have to try to analyze, would they allow it or not? So the Shulchan Aruch says that it depends. If you're taking something from the person and you're taking it forever, and you're not just using it, but you're taking it, let's say an article of food, you're taking possession, you're eating it. But then we have to be machmir that if the person hasn't given permission, even though you know he will, a tissue or a piece of paper, even though you know for sure he would have given permission, we shouldn't take it without permission. But just to use something, similar to a parking spot, to use it and not take it, but just take usage of it, there we can be mekel. That's the psak of the Balatanya. So in this case, let's say in a Jewish store where we know, if we would know that for sure the person would allow, so since you're just using it, it would be mutar. Now it happens to be that when it comes to a store that's not necessarily that's not owned by Yehudim, so there's another reason why it would be permitted to to park there without permission, and that is because even though the halacha is that gezel akum is asur, it's prohibited to steal. The Gemara, the Maran and the Rambam both say that asur lignov ben Yehudi ben akum. It's also they're both asur, but there are differences between Yehudi and akum, and one of the differences are using without permission. There we don't say it doesn't have the stringency of using something without permission of an Einu Yehudi is not similar to using something without permission by a Yehudi, because we learn it out of the pasuk, Vayikach et hachanis miyara mitzri, that he took the vessel from the Egyptian, and from there we see only when you actually are taking something, there we have the isur of gezel akum. But if you're not taking it, you're just using it without permission, even though normally to use something without permission is similar to stealing, to theft. But when it comes to an Einu Yehudi, there would be leniences, and that's why I told him that, especially in this case where it's not being used, it would be permitted to park as if you're not, if it's off hours and you're not hurting anybody, and it's zelo chaser, and it's a non-Jewish establishment, it would be permitted. So that was the answers for these questions. And just take a few minutes of any questions if anybody has a question or two, and then we'll proceed with another with the halachot of ribit, a few very interesting things.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So a lot of college students, they're obviously they're financially unstable at the moment, and there's this website where you could get any gift card you want to Amazon, to any airlines, to Uber Eats, for 60% off. How does it work? What's the big scheme? It's pretty much some people they steal credit cards or whatever, and then they buy gift cards and they sell it online. But since we're not stealing the credit cards, they're just going and buying the gift card online for half the price. Is that stealing, or? They're not. They're just going on a website and buying gift cards. They're not the ones.
So I don't know the particulars, but it doesn't seem like if
you're not allowed to. What's the question?
Not everyone, but a lot of people found out afterwards.
Right.
How do they get the gift card for half the price?
You're asking an interesting question, but I think that the fact that the way it sounded, it seems to be a halachic problem to begin with. I believe so, Rabbi.
Yeah, I mean,
it seems to be just do kosher money.
You buying Groupon?
No. Something else. Seems to be not a kosher source to
card
be
cash.
Okay, so don't take Don't take shortcuts when it comes to money. Don't take shortcuts when it comes to money. The Gemara says, "Nasata v'natata ve'emunah." Transparency when it comes to financial matters is not negotiable. So if you already know that you're getting it from a place, the way I understood, that is not 101% super kosher, so bichlal, you should stay out of it.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interject, but I needed to make sure that nobody walks out of here believing that it's something that, okay, let me check it out. Don't check it out.
Oftentimes, I get invited to people, and they'll give me, let's say, a little bit of scotch. So I want to reciprocate. I send them a whole bottle. Is this going to be covered under the receipt? Because I heard once that if someone lends you a small egg and you give them a big egg,
right,
it can be repeat. But I'm giving this a matana. I have no intention to repeat with you.
Right.
So let me paraphrase the question because of the recording. Our good friend is asking, he was invited to someone's home for a Shabbat meal. And in the middle of the Seudah, the host offered him a bit of scotch. So far, so good? Beautiful. After Shabbat is over, he's sending a bottle of scotch. And now he's giving back 16 ounces. There is a concept mentioned elsewhere. If somebody lends you an egg, you need to give more or less the same size egg. You cannot borrow a quarter cup and return half a cup because the discrepancy of repeat. So he's asking if this bottle that he's giving is considered a repeat because he originally received from his friend only a cup and not a bottle. That's your question? Thank you.
Where is the lending aspect of it?
Not lending. He gave it to you, and you give it back to him.
Right.
So let's the rabbi do the answer.
Right. So just to give a little bit of a background.
Right.
So there's something called sa'a b'sa'a, and there's something called sa'a b'sa'atayim, which means as follows. Not only is it prohibited to borrow a small egg and give back a large egg, which would be called sa'a b'sa'atayim, which the Gemara talks about you borrowing a sa'a of wheat, which is one bundle of wheat, let's say, and you give back 2 bundles of wheat. So there you're borrowing and you're giving back more than you borrowed. That would be called ribit. Like Michael explained, in this case, we have to first analyze, is there any loan over here? In other words, there was no terms. There was no, I'll give you a cup and you give me back a bottle. He gave you a cup for matana, and it was unconditional. And now you want to reciprocate and say, I'll give you back that cup plus a different cup. So that would not be a problem. But if a person, maybe could I just to speak out that I'm not giving this to you because of anything you gave me. This is because I appreciate your hospitality and whatever. To speak it out clearly, that would be admirable. But the concept of why would it be a problem, let's say, to borrow a dozen eggs and give back a dozen eggs? If you're giving them back the same size and same amount, what would be the issue? Anybody try? How could there be any issue of ribit with borrowing and lending and returning eggs? Anybody can give a guess? That's why it would be maybe okay. But what would be the problem? What would be the problem of borrowing let's say a bundle of wheat and giving back a bundle of wheat? If you give me today a bundle, I need wheat, I need to make bread. Give me a bundle of wheat, and next week I'll give you back a bundle of wheat. What could be the issue?
The price, the quality.
But let's say the price and everything is the same. So the answer is because there's two types of materials in finance. There's something called perot and tiv'eh, which means perot is fruit, commodities, and tiv'eh is currency. So when you borrow currency, you borrow $100, you're allowed to give back $100. But let's say you're in the United States and you borrow shkalim. You have a guy who has 100 shkalim or 100 yen, and you give back, and you agree that next week I'll give you back 100 yen or 100 shkalim. So what happens if those shkalim go up in value, and now against the dollar, they're worth $1.50 or $1.20? So when you give back, even though you're giving back the exact same amount, but since it's commodity, so when you give it back, you could be giving back a more valuable commodity than you took. So the same would be with wheat or with eggs. If the price of wheat goes up, so since it's not a currency, so we don't evaluate it. We don't look at it as wheat. We look at it as $100. And when you give me back that same quality of wheat or the same bundle of wheat next week, that bundle could be worth $110. So when you're giving it back 110. That's called sa'a b'sa'a, and it's a astur rabbanan, and there's various heterim, but it is very relevant when you're a person's in Israel and you borrow dollars, or you say I'll pay you back in America. In Israel, the currency could be is shkalim. Some poskim want to say that in Israel it's a dual currency because everything is against the dollar, and rent and anything big happens in dollars in Israel. But here in America, shkalim is definitely called perot. It's definitely a commodity. It's not currency. It's something that you buy, like wheat or like eggs. So that would be one very interesting application of ribit that is not on people's radar, because it seems like you're giving back the exact same thing. Now, mashal, but to give sa'a b'sa'atayim, that if I say lend me a bundle of wheat and I'll give you back 2 bundles, that would be asur because it's actual ribit, and it would be even midoraita if it's stipulated ahead of time. So that's one very interesting concept of ribit. We'll discuss another very interesting concept of ribit, and this also has an application to halachic wills, which we'll digress a little bit. It's possible by ribit, besides the actual lending for ribit, it's also prohibited to draft a contract that has a ribit stipulation, an interest stipulation in the contract. And not only are the two parties, the lender and the borrower, transgressed, but even the lawyer, the sofer, the Gemara talks about, the sofer who writes the document, it would be a problem. The witnesses, the arev, the guarantors, and everything. So this is prohibited under the pasuk of lo tesimun alav neshech. You're not allowed to draft a contract that has a ribit stipulation. This is very relevant to partnership agreements. Many times, you go into a partnership, and what happens if the partnership is going to need to incur an expense? It's going to have to change the roof. And one of the partners, Baruch Hashem, followed the precepts of the Gemara and Brachot, and he took a third of his money, and he kept it liquid. So now that he has a roof, he's got money in the bank, no problem, he writes out a check. But the partner is up maxed out, he doesn't have a penny liquid, he can't come up with the funds. So what do we do? So many times there's a stipulation there that if I lay out money for the roof or for something else that's needed, it'll dilute your position. Right now we're 50-50, but if I put in $100,000 into the roof, then I'm going to be buying you out at the market price, and you'll end up with 45%, and I'll end up with 55% because I paid your fair share of what you should have come up for the partnership. Many other times there's what's called a capital call, which means that one of the partners could lend the other partner the money, and there's a certain ribit stipulation, interest. In other words, if the eventuality comes that cash is needed and one partner has the money, he can lend it to the company or lend it to his partner for his share and take 10% annually on that money. So when we draft the contract, there was no lending, there was no interest going on, there was no ribit, no problem. However, even to draft such a thing in the contract would be a problem of lo tesimun alav neshech, because you're drafting a contract that has an interest stipulation that if I would have to borrow, or have to lend, then I would be able to take money, I would be able to take more interest for this loan that I've given. So that would be a problem of lo tesimun alav neshech.
You were required to do a tera iska?
Yeah, so if you want to do that stipulation within the contract itself, you would add a heter iska clause that if it comes to the eventuality that I'm going to lend you money, it should be according to the stipulations of and the terms and conditions of the heter iska that's attached. Okay, just two more concepts with regards to contracts. What's the story with a late fee? In other words, a person, let's say, has a contract, a tenant, landlord-tenant, or just, I'm going to lend you an interest-free loan and I want you to pay me $1,000 back a month, but if you're more than 5 days late, there's a $100 fee, a $50 fee for late rent. Is that a problem of ribit because you're charging him money to pay late? In yeshiva they do that. What?
Tenant and
Landlord tenant, it's in every contract. So the halacha is that it depends how it's structured. If it's structured that for every occurrence there would be one late fee, then that would be permitted. Because you're not charging money for the delay, it's a penalty for not doing what you're supposed to have done. It's a one-time penalty. So, in other words, for January rent, it comes in January 6th, you can charge a $50 late fee, and that's allowed to be in the contract. But you're not allowed to charge $50 per month that it's late, because that would be paying for the delay of time. If it keeps growing, then that would be ribit. So for every occurrence, it means if he's late in February as well, you can charge him another $100 for February's rent. But for January's rent, you're entitled to charge a one-time late fee, but after that, you're not allowed to charge per month that the January rent was due. If he's late both months, you can charge 2 late fees, but not for January. You can charge another late fee. Only for the February rent are you allowed to charge a late fee. And we'll just end off with one more halacha with regards to wills, and which also is regards to drafting a contract. the halacha is that when a person leaves over his estate to his family, so the father, there's a mitzvah in the Torah that the father is supposed to give a double portion to the bechor, pishnayim, and to the bechor, the firstborn child of the father. The firstborn male child of the father. And if it's the mother, then there would not be a halacha of bechor. Now, what's interesting is that if a person drafts a will that does not give the amount to the bechor, so he, according to many Rishonim, he would be transgressing the halacha in the Torah, the mitzvah of lo yuchal levaker et pnei ben ha'uva pnei ben hasnua habechor, which means that a person is not permitted, he's not allowed to circumvent the bechorah. So by merely drafting the document, even though there's a concept of matneh ma shekatuv b'Torah, if a person says, I don't want my bechor to get pishnayim, to get a double portion, I don't want my first one, it doesn't work. Because in halacha, he has to get a pishnayim. Obviously, there's various ways to set up an estate, which is something that we're very, very busy with. Setting up estates al pi halacha where a person wants to give everything to his wife, or wants it to be basically equal, all his children, there shouldn't be any resentment. So there's a way to structure it that would be mutar. But in a basic way, if a person just writes a will and writes, I don't want to do the pishnayim stipulation, the double portion, that would be a transgression of this lav in the Torah, lo yuchal levaker et pnei ben ahuva pnei ben hasnua bechor. So even writing the document, even though it doesn't work, there's a chiddush of the Ramban that the Ramban says that even though it doesn't even work, but just writing the document is prohibited. So when you write documents, create agreements, it's always worthwhile having them reviewed, and that's something that we do, to send it beforehand, just to make sure there's no halachic documents, and we work with the attorneys, and we work with, to make sure that everything's done both legally and al pi halacha in the strongest manner.
Kahal Kadosh, I think that we all got a lot of interesting halachic perspectives when it comes to the topic of kosher money. And Be'ezat Hashem, anyone who happens to have a halachic question on the topic of finances or assistance with any kind of halachic documents, if it's a teraiska, living will, estate planning, etc., feel free to contact, as I said before, the Sephardic Halakha Center. That's www.theshc.org. Okay? And Be'ezat Hashem, send an email or approach me directly, and I'll give you the rabbi's direct contact, so the rabbi's assistants can take the basic information and try to guide everyone, as the pasuk says, "Lada'at et ha'ma'aseh asher ya'asun." Additionally, right, the rabbi he brought a gift for everybody. There is a beautiful booklet which I saw already 2 weeks ago, basically business in halakha, discussing the topic of living wills, halachic will, DNA, inheritance, and the precedents when it comes to inheritance, with an interesting chart in the back. So feel free to take one, so at least to familiarize ourselves, and Be'ezat Hashem will bless the great rabbi and his elite group of the Yanim and Hachamim to be successful in an area where people many times write their own Shulchan Aruch. Many times, because it has to do with money, they write their own halachot. And I think that today we got a magnificent class understanding the Gemara in Shabbat that says, Nasata benatata be'emunah. First question, before even asking, did you hope for Mashiach to come? Did you learn Torah daily? Did you raise your children in the ways of Torah? They ask you, how kosher was your money? How honest were you in business? And honest is not only between people. It's honest also when it comes to how a person follows the world of halakha, specifically in the concept of dineh mamonot. So at this time, we wish the rabbi great aslaha in all his holy endeavors. Just remember the Gemara that says, Yesh din lemata en din lema'ala. When matters are settled and wrapped up on this world, the heavens don't need to get involved. It's easier to manage it here than after 120. The rabbi, I think, will be available a few minutes if people have particular questions, and Be'ezat Hashem will continue. We are going to say Ashkava right after Kaddish. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashi.